Welcome to the Wonk Podcast. This week's guest is Rachel Olsen, Comedy Central's Senior Director of Talent and Development. We'll talk about her rise from assistant to coordinator to manager to senior director. We'll also break down why Comedy Central ultimately passed on Wonk News and Lady Mavericks, and the 4 brand filters they run each show through to see if it's a fit for their network. Enjoy.
I was born in Utah. When my parents split, my mom moved us to Oregon so she could go back to school. And while I was there, I went to this arts high school in Beaverton, Oregon, which is just outside of Portland. So like math was just like building puzzles, and there was all these other classes you could take, and you had to apply to get in with whatever your art was. And I just picked writing because that's what I'd done before. But while I was there, I learned like, oh, a lot of people are, I started feeling shitty about myself because I'm like, oh, a lot of people are like really great painters or amazing photographers or they're musicians or ballet dancers. And I was just like, oh, I'm just like, I can write an essay or whatever. But then I realized I liked photography and I liked music, but I didn't really feel like I knew how to use music. So I was like, well, let me take this video class, and realized like, oh, for the video, you get to use photography. You can employ music that you care about, even if you're not musically inclined, and you get to write and tell stories. So that's when I was just like, cool, I'm picking this. And then maybe I didn't do enough research, but I think at the time there wasn't any film schools in Oregon that I knew of. So I just applied to USC and UCLA and Cal State Long Beach and got into USC. But, you know, I graduated early. I was like ready to move, and I was 17. Didn't really know what I was talking about. My mom was in denial that I was going to leave, so she didn't really help me with any of that stuff. She's like, oh, you're pretending you're going to move to California, but you're not. So I applied to all these schools and didn't realize like, oh, with USC, at least at the time, you can get in, but it's out-of-state tuition, super expensive, and you might not actually get into your concentration, which was the School of Film and Television. And so I was like, well, I don't want to go there. And I didn't get into UCLA, but I got into Cal State Long Beach, which I think everyone gets in.
Yeah.
And so I went there, but I think I was just I moved to Long Beach. I was 17. I didn't even have, I couldn't get a cell phone because I wasn't old enough to sign the contract. I'm like trying to get Jamba Juice to rehire me because that was my high school job. I'm like, well, there's one in Long Beach. And so I started going to school at Cal State Long Beach and was just like not feeling it. And like there was something that got messed up with my admissions and I didn't get the classes I wanted. So I was like, just had a bad taste in my mouth, which was probably just that I was too young to know what I was doing and didn't have anyone guiding me. So I dropped out and then just was like, I'm taking a year. I can't remember where I heard about this, but I was like, oh, if you're a resident, community college at the time was only $17 a unit or something.
Yeah.
And I was too dumb to understand how financial aid worked. So I was like, cool, well, I'll just get a day job and I'll pay for my way to go through community college. And that's when I applied to OCC just randomly because it was closest to my day job at an insurance office that my uncle ran. And so...
What year is this?
This would have been 2003, I think.
Cool.
Because I graduated high school 2002 and moved out here. Took a year to get residency. As long as you voted and you paid your taxes for a year, you're a resident. Mm-hmm. So got to go to OCC as a local, and turned out, oh, they have a great film and TV program there, which I didn't even do the research. I just found out later. Yeah. So that's where I, met you and did all the mostly TV stuff is what they focused on, and it seemed like mostly technical things, here's how you do a technical director, and here's how you I took photography classes and stuff too.
Did you not take any of the film script writing classes or actually use film or anything like that?
I don't remember. No, we did use film. I took that one class with Larry Riggins.
Riggins, yes.
Yeah.
That's a good screenwriting class. I remember that.
That's right. So me and Brett wrote that little short that you were in.
Where I played the devil.
You played the devil.
Yeah.
It was called Bob's Office, I think.
I wish, if you have it, we need to post it with this
Brett
podcast.
Norman in Texas has the reels, and he's not the type of person that will put a package together and put it in the mail, so I don't think I'm ever going to see him again.
We'll talk to Chip or something like that.
We'll talk to Chip.
Chip and Brett, they came out, and they were the Midwestern.
Yeah, they wrote a Western. They made a Western that was kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
But but I met them because I was like kind of like the marketing person for the OCC shorts in the Newport Beach Film Fest.
Oh.
Well, I was like trying to help like put out flyers and
through OCC or through Newport Beach?
Through OCC.
That's dope.
But yeah, so that was my OCC experience. It's like it took a long time, as most people do with community college, because you lose sight of the goal, and it's cheap and easy to just dabble in like, oh, let's try a marketing class. Let's try this kind of class.
How many years were you there?
I can't remember, but there was a moment where I realized like, oh, I can either wait a whole year to apply to university, or I can like hurry up and finish in this semester by taking a lot of classes. So I did that so that I could like hit the deadline to apply to UCLA. So
did you finish all the film classes pretty much?
Yeah, I got my associate's degree and my certificate.
Dope.
And I like made sure I got a 4.0 because I was like, I need to make sure I get into a good school, excuse me, this time, instead of like, high school. And my grades were just whatever.
You had a junior college plan. That's dope.
I had a plan, yeah.
Good for you.
So, excuse me, I remember applying to UCLA and like realizing that the date that it was supposed to be received was actually the date that I thought I had to have it postmarked. And so I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And I realized like, wait, I live in Southern California. I'm just going to drive it over there. So I remember getting in the car with my boyfriend at the time, Brett, and he was just like, I can't remember what he said exactly, but it always stuck with me that he was just like, yeah, it's cool that you're like trying so hard even though you're like not going to get in.
Whoa.
And I'm like, wait, what? And he's like, well, there's just so many people that are applying. Like the odds are super low, like acting like I was like playing the lotto.
Yeah.
And so I just like, it bummed me out, but I was just like, the one thing that sort of like, if I was going to give people advice, I guess, that gave me like the balls to move to LA and like try the whole thing, and like gave me the optimism to be like, yeah, I'm going to apply to UCLA and I'm probably going to get in. It was just like this mantra of like, if anyone else has achieved this, there's no reason why I couldn't. Like there's no real thing holding me back that makes me like less qualified or more qualified than anyone else. So you might as well try. I think a lot of people sit at home and think, well, I'll never do it, or it's too hard, or those people that have done it must be special. But it's like legit, like it's the only way to be sure that you're not going to do it is to not try it, which is like so trite and cliche, but it's like at a moment in my life I was like really like living that, and it was like that's when all the opportunities came, because I'm just like, yeah, let me try this.
Wow. Thank you, Brett.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brett, and hopefully thank you for the video you're about to send.
Yeah.
That's dope, though.
Yeah.
I love when stuff sticks in your head like that.
Yeah,
because
like,
he's not in LA. I remember he left like right after you did.
Yeah. Well, he moved up to because I started at UCLA and he moved in with me for a while, but then decided to go back to school, I think, in Texas.
So you're in UCLA.
Mm-hmm.
And just taking the film classes. What's going on there?
Yeah, so at UCLA, because I was a transfer in, which I'm really glad I did in retrospect, even though it was like glamorous to think like, oh, I'm going to go have the university experience, and never like thought I would join a sorority, but like the image that you have of like college life and living in dorms and stuff. By then it's like I had already like lived in LA for a while and had put myself through, like I had all these jobs. Like there was a guy that moved out with me from high school, my previous boyfriend, and like so I already felt like we were like, I knew what it was like to be married at such a young age, because it was just like, oh cool, I'm 17 and I lived with this guy for 5 years. And so like I felt like I'd kind of like, I'm a little too grown up, or not even grown up, but just like, all right, I'm too old for this shit now. Like I didn't want to like live in a dorm.
Yeah.
So by then I was like transferred in, I get an apartment. I didn't have to really take any of the regular like curriculum classes, because it was like, oh, you already have your associates. Now you just get to focus on film. And like the film school was your huge focus, and you just got to do that the whole time, which was awesome. And you meet, like my class was just a group of 30 people. So you get to meet all these people and, collaborate with them if you're like-minded, and you guys would like share labor on your projects. Like, okay, cool. They're like, this is your group. And you get to hire, quote, hire, like for free, like your what's the word? Your fellow
Co-students,
students. Yeah. And then they get to hire you. It's like a trade. So like, you might hire one person to be your DP or your craft service person or a PA, and like it doesn't matter, like then you get to be their assistant director or whatever. It's just like whatever's needed. And that is such a hard part about like making video and film and stuff, is like, yeah, everybody's got an iPhone now, where like it's easy to get access to editing software and like the equipment. But it's like you need a lot of people to make stuff. And so having like a built-in crew where you don't have to worry about asking for favors, and it's just like, yeah, these people are going to help me and they get it and they care and I'm going to return the favor. Like building a community like that, whether it's in film school or whether it's just like you're taking UCB classes, or I don't even know, like just finding like a group of friends that are all interested in that stuff is so valuable, because it makes like making something feel possible, which you obviously know.
Yeah.
And like that's probably how the Workaholics guys figured it out. Is like they just had each other to, figure all that stuff out, and like have like a built-in like, okay, cool, let's make something, and you can just decide that morning and make it that night. Like that's a huge, like if you want to feel the freedom to make stuff and practice, like that's definitely like build your little community of people to make stuff. And that's really what film school was. It's not you learn all these secrets that you couldn't find out somewhere else. There is some networking that goes on, but mostly UCLA was just like, oh, we're going to teach you how to be the best at whatever your craft is. And then you kind of go figure it out. Whereas from what I hear anyway, like USC is more like, we're going to teach you how the business works. And like, we're going to, the alum are going to reach out to you and help you get a job as like an agent's assistant or whatever. Whereas like, I think there's less of that at UCLA. It's just like, hey, be really good at directing if that's what you want to do. Be really good at writing if that's what you want to do. But the biggest thing for me was, just like having that community of people that were down to help was like so helpful and liberating and made it possible.
That's awesome. You still work with anybody from UCLA?
I'm still in touch with a few of them, and then one of them has become one of my best friends, and we are just like buddies. Her name's Heather, and she's a stand-up and a musician and a writer, and she's super funny. So me and her kind of like we're kindred spirits. But then there's other people that have gone off to do like one girl, Vanessa, is like the main director for like a lot of stuff in Atlanta, like things like Say Yes to the Dress, like shows like that. So there was definitely some success stories that came out, like people working in the business for sure.
That's dope. What were you focused on at UCLA?
My concentration was directing. So, you do like the base level, like learn everything. You take like the cinematography classes, you take the screenwriting classes, you take directing classes, and then you get to pick your electives. And so all mine were in like the directing. And so the culmination of that is to make a short film, which was Mitzi, which was just, it's a 12-minute short film. So that was like my final project or whatever that was like, okay, cool, you graduate.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of other like smaller projects that we did just for practice.
But Mitzi was the biggest one.
That was the biggest undertaking, yeah.
And did that one open any doors for you?
That one was kind of like, it was a great experience. I loved making it. It made me realize that I really love directing and being on set with a group of people that like you kind of curate the vibe, which is like a thing that I think only a director really does on set. At least on a film set, like TV, like writers are kind of the top dog. In film, it's like directors are more the top, and then obviously things filter down based on like the attitude of the boss. So I just like really loved having like a crew and like people, and it was like a really fun time on set. And it won like the best script award that year for UCLA's film festival. And then I don't know, I guess this is a good lesson, so I'll say it out loud, but like one of the things, like as much as I like, okay, I won an award and like I got a lot of positive feedback and people gave me a lot of compliments about it, like I knew that it wasn't perfect, like the writing wasn't perfect. That was one thing I wish I would have focused on more, is like my writing skills at UCLA. I was so much more focused on directing and directing performers in particular. And so like any little criticism, I remember like my dad had criticized it. Like he said that the end, like it ended on kind of like an anticlimactic, like she doesn't learn the lesson. Yeah. Which for me, I thought that like that was intentional. It's like, oh, she didn't learn, she's a flawed protagonist. And so my dad was like, well, you really need to give people an example of how to be in blah, 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 and it ends in a way that's like not satisfying. And that coming from anyone else maybe wouldn't have been a big deal, but like coming from your own dad is like, it made me like actually just want to, like I was ashamed of it and just buried it and didn't send it to festivals, didn't do anything with it, which I didn't realize how much that might have affected me at the time. But looking back, I was like, whoa, what happened? Why did I like not do anything? And it was just that. I was like, oh, it's not perfect. I struggle from being a perfectionist, which is not a good thing. It's it hinders you in almost every endeavor.
Nothing ever gets done if you're a perfectionist.
Exactly. So that's something I struggle with. So I was like, oh, cool, this thing's not perfect, never mind. So the answer is no, it didn't open any doors for me, but it did really like teach me that I like directing, and it was like, at the time anyway, like a good example of like the kind of stuff I would want to do. So like I graduated high school 2002 and I graduated university 2009. So it's like
your doctorate.
I could have been a doctor, and instead I got a bachelor's of film from UCLA. Cool. But you know, it's the journey, not the destination. No. So yeah, at that time, like the guy that delivered the speech at our graduation was like, everyone was just talking about how the economy's shit and that you're not going to get a job, so just like buckle up. It was like really like not encouraging at all. And it was like Oliver Stone spoke, and he was just talking about how much he hates Republicans and Bush, who I think wasn't even in office anymore. So it was like all of our like Republican family members were just like rolling their eyes sitting through it. It was a horrible ceremony. Anyway, but so that was like the thing. It was like, okay, you're not going to get a job. So immediately I was like, well, cool, let me just like think of what I would do. Like if I'm probably not going to get a job, what am I going to do? So I had like set myself up. I got rid of my apartment. I stashed my car. I put all my shit in storage, and I was like, well, let me go visit my family in Utah for the summer at least. So I go there, and I had set myself up to like go to Costa Rica and work at a sloth sanctuary, which I was obsessed with sloths. I thought they were super cute at the time. I was like, oh, there's a sanctuary where you can find baby sloths whose mothers have abandoned them, and you can feed them with bottles. Wow. I was like, cool. So I was like set up. I was ready to go there in the fall, was going to start. And then I was like, well, I should probably like apply to a few jobs in the film industry, at least to try.
Before you go on the sloth adventure.
Before I go become a sloth sanctuary person. So I remember this is one of the most valuable things, was working internships. That's like where you actually get like trading information, you get something on your resume. Like even if you're doing jack shit, like people want to know like, oh, you can hang, you can be in an office and not bother everyone. And like, it's like a huge, it's like very helpful to do internships. I recommend people do as many as they possibly can, especially while they're still in school and you can get credit for it. So anyway, some guy that I can't even remember his name right now told me about the UTA job list, which is just a list that UTA, which is an agency, puts out that's like, hey, here's all the jobs. And a lot of them are entry level because the higher level jobs are more word of mouth. They don't like put out a listing. And so one of the, I logged in and like looked at that. It was like a bootleg copy of it on some dude's website. And I just like, they're really vague about what the job is because they don't want people just like calling up willy-nilly. They want you to apply through the channels. So I just like did a control find. It was like anything comedy. Because that was one thing that was great that I learned about in film school was like, oh, all I want to do is watch comedies, and all I want to do is, like, my measure of success is try to make something that I would want to watch, which is like a really easy thing to just like set your sights on. So I was like, well, I like comedies, and let me try to make comedies. I think I have a good sense of like what is funny, at least to me. So I just was searching anything that had to do with comedy and applied to like 3 jobs. And one of them, they called me up. I was like on the back of a jet ski when I got this call on a Friday in Utah. And
wow.
They were like, hey, saw your resume for this job. Can you come in on Monday? And I'm just like, yep, I'll be there.
Zoom, zoom.
Yeah. And so I booked a flight. To my dad's credit, he was like, I'll pay for your flight back. If you go out there and you don't make it, like you don't get the job, that's fine. I'll pay for you to come back. And I was like, okay, cool. So I fly out there on Monday. They didn't know until I got there that I had like flown in for this job interview in particular, and they felt bad about it. But so met with them. realized that the job was to be an assistant to Jenna Fisher, who was Pam on The Office right at the time. She was just looking for like a part-time assistant, and on my resume it said that I was like an aspiring writer. So like, oh cool, when there's downtime she can like, you know, work on her writing and stuff. And then I found out, so I'm sitting there talking to Naomi Odenkirk and Brooke Pobjoy, who are like, Naomi was like one of the partners of Odenkirk Provocero, so Bob Odenkirk's wife. So they were hiring for their client, Jenna Fisher. They were trying to help her find someone. And then, you know, halfway through the interview, they were like, she should meet Mark. And I'm like, I don't know who Mark is, but sure, I'm down. So then Mark comes in, and we basically start the whole interview over because now there's a new person in, and apparently Mark was looking for an assistant. So this is a management company. They manage writers and directors and performers. So then I'm meeting with him, and he's like, well, I want someone with agency experience who's like been on a desk before, who's been an assistant before. And I remember this because he told me like that he was impressed by this. So I was like, oh, okay, you know, a tidbit to share was like, he's like, well, how are you gonna, you know, do you know how to roll calls? Have you ever rolled calls? Like, that's like a thing that people are always talking about. They need in their assistant, someone who can roll calls, which is just like returning phone calls with your boss. It's basically like a little bit of a switchboard situation. It's slightly complicated, but not that big of a deal. I didn't even know what this meant, but I was just like, it's a phone. Like, it's not going to be hard. I'll figure it out. And he was impressed by that. Like, it was a little snarky, I guess, but he thought it was good. And then, so afterwards it was like, okay, now I'm realizing that there's this kind of more steady, stable, full-time job to be Mark's assistant in this office where, like, I thought the people were cool and they have really cool clients and they only deal in comedy, which was really appealing to me. Or I could be Jenna Fisher's part-time assistant. And I was like, in the moment, I was like, well, I want the job with Mark. And so I just told them that. I was like, well, yeah, I want that job. And then they're like, all right, well, we'll let you know. And then they called me that night and offered me the job. So that was my first job, my first interview.
And then now you're in LA now.
Yeah. And now I'm like, okay, I guess I don't need that ticket back to my dad's house. So I'm just like, they're like, you start next week. And so I was like, okay, cool. I need an apartment. I was just crashing on a friend's couch for a while. I got an apartment in Koreatown that was like $500 a month, which you'd never find that now. Shitty little studio with no parking. But yeah, so then I just started and I was his assistant, and which gave me all this access to like how the business works. But like I straight up didn't know what I was doing at first. He like hired me and he's like, cool, by the way, I'm going to Egypt for a month and I'm unreachable. Handle my business. And I was the only person who worked on the lit side, which means writers and directors. So I kind of like didn't know what I was doing. And in my mind, it was like the kind of job where it's like someone goes, hey, do this. And you're like, cool, got it. But like he came back from Egypt and was like, wait, what's going on? Like, this is fucked up. This is fucked up. And I'm just like, oh, well, like, to my credit, he did not train me.
Yeah.
So, and I didn't know what I was doing. So,
was there a lot of calls while he was gone? Was there a lot of business while he was gone?
It wasn't a ton. It was mostly like keeping track of like what checks were coming in and whose commission's going where and making sure people were paid and stuff like that. And like handling calls when they did come in and sending him stuff that was important. But yeah, so he had to have a talk with me, and like it was almost like, oh, she's gonna get fired. Like that was the vibe. But all I like realized from like the talk was like, oh, he doesn't want me to wait for the job to come to me. He wants me to take over. So the next day I come in, I'm like, cool, I'm the boss. Like that was just what I was telling him. I'm like, okay, I'm the boss now. And I'm telling him, like, you need to call this person back and this needs to happen. And like, I was always like shy to interrupt him when he was like in the middle of something. You cannot be shy to interrupt someone if you're their assistant. You have to do it all the time, which I try to be like so polite and not in the way that it was like difficult for me to get used to that. But it's just like, hey, I don't understand this. You need to show me this, you know? And after that, he would always be like, oh my God, you went from almost getting fired to being like the best assistant I've ever had. And like, so it was just like definitely like a mental switch of like, instead of I'm taking the orders, like I'm the boss of this office and I'm going to tell you how to run this, which is great because that's what someone wants in their assistant is like, they just want to focus on their clients and big picture stuff and strategizing. They don't want to like, even think about like, well, who do I need to call back first? It's like, no, I'm going to tell you this is urgent and here's why. Let's call this person. And if you don't tell me like, let's roll calls, it's like, hey, do you want to roll calls? You owe 5 people and one of them's from last week. You know what I mean? It's like taking initiative, huge thing. in being an assistant. And that's like a big way to have an entry-level job in this industry is like assisting someone at a management company, assisting someone at an agency. Even if you don't want to take on those jobs, it's a really good way in to figure out how it works and to realize what you do want to do and realize what jobs there even are. Because a lot of times, like, before I came to Comedy Central, I didn't know that this was a job until it got offered to me. I was like, oh, okay, cool, development's a thing. Like, I didn't know. So that's one thing that, like, you get access to if you're an assistant, even though it's, like, you know, entry-level stuff.
Yeah, you see the business.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
That's dope. So what was the step next after Mark?
So one thing that happened is that they were branching out from just a management company to a production company. And that meant that they were taking out projects with their clients, pitching them to buyers, and then, you know, if they got a pilot ordered, they would be the production company. So they had a few projects that got picked up. One of them was called Let's Do This, that Bob Odenkirk was starring in with these two other writers, and that was for Adult Swim. The other one was called How to Cheat on Your Wife with one of their clients, and that was for AMC. And the other one was a sketch show with Tim Robinson and Mark Ratterman for Comedy Central. And so when these projects started coming in and they were ordering pilot presentations, I was like, hey, so I went to film school. I kind of know how to do this. Like, I'd love to help out. And nobody else really was super interested in production, or they just didn't have the experience. So they were like, yeah, go for it. Run with it. As long as, like, you get your regular job done, like, you can go do all that stuff. So they were really cool about just letting me, like, really run with it and, like, be as involved as I wanted to be. And, like, they even gave me, like, let me have associate producer credit, like, on some of the later projects. But, so one of those projects, like I said, was a sketch show called My Mans with Tim and Mark for Comedy Central. And so I was on set every day when we were shooting it and just sort of like being the liaison, like coordinating, producing, like making sure everything was handled, just like anything that fell through the cracks. Like, and because everything was coming through me, I like knew everything, which is a really great feeling to be like, oh yeah, I know all the details. I know exactly who to talk to about every little thing. So when the executives from the network came to visit set, which is something that is normal for like the execs that are like working on the show, from the buyer to just like come and like show support and also just like make sure things are running okay. So the two executives on that show came to set, and I was the sort of face that was like, hey, do you want a headset? Do you want to sit on this chair and like watch the monitor, and making sure they had like whatever they needed. And so in just like a brief encounter with one of the execs, she was impressed with me, and then her boss needed a new assistant, and so she called me and was just like, hey, I don't know if this is appropriate, but maybe you don't want to be a manager, maybe you'd like to come over to Comedy Central and, you know, interview to be Jim Sharp's assistant. And he was the head of the development department at the time. And I was like, in my mind, I was like, oh, I'm about to pitch myself for a promotion at Odenkirk, and I just want to be their like development production person. And I was like ready to move up in that company. So I was like not even super interested, but I was like, of course I'll meet. Like, you should always meet, because like what if you learn something, or, you know, it's always beneficial to meet with someone, not to waste their time. But I was like, I'm curious. I'm not sure I want this, but I'm curious. So I go in and meet with Jim Sharp, and we hit it off right away. And he liked me, and he wanted to hire me to be his assistant. So then, like, at this point, Mark was in China, I think. So
it's always when he's gone, huh?
He traveled a lot. He has a great work-life balance that I admire. So he was in China at the time, and I'm like, shit, I was going to wait till he got back from China and be like, hey, I want a promotion, and like lay out a whole plan for myself. But instead, I had to have a very expensive international call with him about it. And I'm like, hey, I got offered this job at Comedy Central. I'll stay here if you can, you know, offer me a development position here. And I want to get off the desk, which is another way of saying, like, I want to be promoted above assistant. And he, at the time, was just like, if you want to be a manager, we'll promote you to a manager right now. We're just not big enough to have, like, a dedicated development person. And I was like, okay. And I knew I didn't want to be a manager, because that's just like the rep game is like a totally different beast that I didn't feel I could handle.
Yeah.
You're just responsible for so much, and you're never off duty. So that was not something for me. But so like I took the job at Comedy Central, which to me felt super scary, and I was imagining it being like 1,000 times more hectic and busy. And then I arrived to find like, oh, things on the buyer side are actually pretty chill because you're the buyer. Like, stuff's coming to you. You kind of work at your own pace. Whereas on the rep side, like, you're selling. Like, you're like frantically making sure like nothing's slipping through the cracks. And, you know, can be more rewarding because you have more ownership and more freedom. But on the buyer side, like, you do kind of get to like chill more. It's just a slower pace.
Yeah.
Big stakes because like you're spending a lot of money on projects. But so anyway, I learned that like I actually like really loved it, working in development. This job that like I did not know existed until I was the assistant to the like head of the department.
Yeah. What year is this?
This was 2013. Like end of like December of 2012, early 2013 is when I started. So then just like really like figured out like, oh, the skills that I kind of already had that I was just doing for fun are super valuable at Comedy Central. And that was like reading a lot of scripts, going to tons of shows. Like that's what I was known for, is just like I would be at like the comedy shows every night, and like I knew all the up and comers, like people that weren't on anyone's radar above my level. So that was like a really valuable thing. And these are people that like they have kids, they have families, they just want to go home after work. And I'm like, cool, I'm ready to like go out and have a bunch of drinks with like all these comedians and see all these shows. And I was just tireless. And that was something that I almost thought I was doing that like I shouldn't be doing, like going out and partying after work and just like seeing tons of shows. And it turns out like, oh no, that's like actually part of the job. And now I'm getting paid for it, which was cool. Yeah. They gave me like a credit card to like, now I can buy people drinks and stuff, which was like so fun. Even though
this is while you were an assistant, you had a credit card?
Yeah, they were really good about it. Like Jim was cool in that he like almost didn't want to hire me because he's like, I think you're overqualified for this, because my resume looked good. It's like, okay, I've been an assistant, I've been an associate producer on a project. Like I was a little older, kind of like knew what I was doing. So he was like, I don't know if you want this job. I was like, no, I want this job. And and I was like, but I want to get promoted quickly. Like I'm happy to put in a year or two, whatever, on the desk, but then I want to like get promoted. And so like right off, like in my second interview, I think like someone came in and interrupted with like, hey, we have a quick question about this project. And it was Andre Hyland's project. And I was like, oh, Andre, I know him. I'm friends with him, and I've gone to his show a million times, the Jesse Miller Talk Show. And they're like, oh, Jesse Miller Talk Show, that's the pilot that we're doing. I'm like, oh, cool. Here, you know, and they're like, well, what do you think about it? And I had all these ideas for how to make it better and how to make it a TV show. And they're like, cool, you're kind of going to be like a unofficial executive on that. So like day one of my job, I'm like already like on a quote unquote project as an exec, like not officially, because it like wasn't kosher to have assistants be execs on shows. But so I just like immediately was doing the job that I wanted. And I was just like waiting. Nobody was telling me no. I was like, I'll just keep trying to do whatever I want until someone tells me no. And so that's how I kind of proved to them that I could get promoted really quickly. It's like, I'm already doing the job. Just give me the title.
And he wasn't having you do like assistant stuff you were doing.
No, I was doing that too.
Oh.
I was double duty. Like I'm answering his phones. I'm doing his scheduling. I'm filing his emails. I'm like reading scripts. I'm making sure he's got dinner reservations, all that shit. But also like in the little time in between, I'm like watching cuts and suggesting edits and reading scripts and trying to like join meetings and join pitches. So I would like, if there's an intern, I'd have them kind of like sit on the desk and cover the phones while I'm like in another meeting. So you have to cover your bases, but it's like when you're young like that and you're so excited, it's like you have all the energy to do everything, and you're so excited to just like do something that now I'm like, ugh, I have another, you know what I mean? Like things that I'm just like bored with now, I was like so excited to do back then.
Yeah.
It's a fun job. It's exciting.
So you were there you did that for a year, and then you actually got the position? Or what?
I can't remember exactly. Like, I know I got promoted like roughly every year and a half. So it went assistant, coordinator, manager, director, senior director, which is where I'm at now.
Was Workaholics your first, like on-site? Is that how you say it, on-site?
No, the first show. So the interesting thing about Comedy Central, or at least the unique thing, is that our executives, which is me, my job, is current and development. So current shows are shows that are on the air that the public's aware of, they can watch it. or that has like a series order. Whereas development is like research and development, like you're trying things out, stuff that will never see the light of day. Some of it's a script, some of it's a pilot. So we do both. So I had done like the Jesse Miller talk show. That was something that didn't end up happening, but that was a development project that I was on. The first show that was a current running show that I was on was Nathan For You. So that and then when Seth Cohen left the company, he was like, "You're taking over Workaholics." And so I got to join on in, like, I think you were right, season 4. Yeah. So that was one that was already running. Like, I didn't develop that show. I remember seeing it, like, before I worked at Comedy Central, and I was like, oh, yeah, I remember Blake from OCC, like, sort of tangentially, like, saw him in a few projects and saw him around. So it was, like, kind of cool and surreal to be like, oh, I'm, like, working on this project. But by then it was, like, really kind of running itself, and we try to be pretty hands-off, especially with, like, a proven show. So it was, like, going to the table reads and going on set, but they knew what they were doing, and, like, they had it all figured out. So we tried not to really meddle much, which I was happy to not meddle.
Yeah, that's dope. Saw you at my table read for that.
Yeah, yeah. So it's just
like the weirdest thing ever.
I know, it's a trip. Everybody that you meet, like, comes back around,
you know? Do.
Which is, like, be nice to everyone.
Yeah. And
the other thing that's fun is, like, when someone is, like, your boss and then you end up being their boss, like, that happens.
Has that happened to you?
Not in so much in that way, but it's happened, like my current boss, he hired someone who used to be his boss. So it happens. So cool. Yeah. But, like, for me, it's more like, oh, like, people that I was, like, buddies with and looked up to in the comedy scene when I was an assistant, and, like, then, like, I'm the exec on their project, like, giving them notes. It's freaking weird. Like, it's hard to wrap your head around, which is, like, why the answer is just always be humble, always know you can learn something from someone, and don't contribute unless you're actually helping.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of people in my position will give a note on something just to prove that they are doing their job. It's like, absolutely not. My favorite thing to do is say, I have no notes. Great job.
That's dope.
Yeah.
No notes.
No notes.
That's great. Was the first thing you helped develop Detroiters, or were you ground floor with that?
Yes, so that was one where, Tim Robinson, who was a client at Odenkirk Pravacero, still is, and he was one of the leads and creators on My Mans, which I was a producer on, that got me the job at Comedy Central. So those guys were from a bigger sketch group out of Chicago called Cook County Social Club. And then, so then we were planning to do another pilot, which I had helped develop at Comedy Central, called Schlub Life, which was going to be Tim and Brendan, but then Tim got on SNL, so he left, and then we recast that role. So that was one that we developed that didn't go past the pilot phase, and then they came in and pitched, Tim and Sam came in and pitched Detroiters, and that was with Broadway Video, which is Lorne Michaels' company, so he was able to do it under that umbrella while still at SNL. So that was one that yes, I was in the pitch and, like, helped develop from the ground up. So yeah, that's one that is on the air that I did help develop. So that was one that, like, kind of took from development to current. Yeah. That's
dope. What do you got going right now? What's the most exciting thing going on at Comedy Central right now?
So I'm trying to figure out what I can actually say. We have a lot of shows, a lot of new scripted shows that are coming out. One of them's called The Other Two, and one of them's called Southside. And I just shot 2 pilots over the summer. One is with Nora Lum, a.k.a. Aquafina, and she's been in, like, Ocean's 8 and Crazy Rich Asians. And so one is her show, and the other one is called Robbie with Rory Scovel, who's a really funny stand-up comedian and actor. He was in I Feel Pretty as the love interest. So those are 2 pilots that we're, like, waiting to see if those will go to series. So those are things that I've developed that hopefully will become current shows as well.
When it comes to a pilot, can you greenlight that, or do you have to go up the flagpole to get money to do a pilot?
You got to go up the flagpole. So at my level, like, there's only, like, 3 people in the company that have, like, real, like, greenlight a pilot power, and so that's sort of the process. Like, people come in and pitch a show to me and my colleagues, and we have these things called brand filters that help us decide what's right for us. which is like super funny, culturally relevant, personally relevant, and provocative. Like those are the things that we've done a lot of research to know that our audience expects from us. So if you look at any of our successful shows like Workaholics, like Tosh, like South Park, like Daily Show, like they all check those boxes in one way or another. So we kind of are the first line of defense to see if something's right for us. And then if it is, we have to repitch it to our bosses. Taking into account like that there's room for development. Like that's why it's called development. Like we can change things or help things along that to help it maybe be more right for us if the creators are willing. Sometimes they're not, and that's fine. Like, oh, we need this to be more joke heavy. And they're like, no, we don't want that. This is a dramedy. It's like, cool, probably not for us, but Godspeed, So that's the process. And if we can get our bosses on board, then we take a development step, which is ordering some form, like we're paying the creators to do something, whether that's a script only, and then after the script's done, we'll decide if it's going to be a pilot. That's how we usually do things. Occasionally, and usually this is if like it's a competitive situation where other buyers are trying to buy it too, and we have to kind of like double down on our offer, we'll just go straight to pilot order. And then you get to shoot these pilots, and you get to hire like the director if they aren't already attached. You get to cast it if cast isn't already built in. Well, you get to help, so that's the part of it, is like helping figure out like all these things you're overseeing without like being micromanaging.
Yeah. And you want it to work because this is this project
Yes.
that you're now a part of.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's a weird situation to be in because you're not one of the creators, but you're so on their side and you want them to succeed so much, but you have this intel that you don't want them to have to worry about as much of like what is going to actually get picked up to series and what is actually going to get ratings from our specific audience, which is like stuff that we know better than they do because they don't work here. Like it makes sense. So it's really just like trying to do like if you're casting a role, for example, like, okay, you want to cast like the best friend of the lead. We're going to try to suggest people that our audience already loves, that we internally already love, which is usually the same thing, hopefully. Sometimes it's not. But the audience always wins in that case. And so like we're going to suggest those people. And if they're giving us someone that we think is not right for our audience, we'll push back in those situations. But you want to give them everything they want. Like, and you never want to bulldoze anyone. Like we usually try to give notes, like instead of giving suggestions like, oh, they should be 23 years old instead of 12 years old. We just go, we're kind of bumping on the fact that they're only 12 and they're in these kind of adult situations. Like, is that something like you could go back and think about and get back to us? And then it's coming from the creator instead of from you. And maybe their answer isn't to make them be older, it's to make the situations younger. You leave it to the creator to fulfill their vision. So I think that's ideally how you do it, is like you want to like point out potential issues and let the creatives do their job. Like they're the writers, they're the creators, we're not. It's like their vision, not ours. It's just to help them carve out their vision in a way that will be sellable, because it's easy to forget that like this is a business. It's crazy, like I'll forget it sometimes because I get wrapped up in like the art of it, and you don't want the artist to be worried about that, but the truth is like you're selling your art to fill a need. And if you have this really cool project that's super creative and artistic and funny and whatever, but it's not fulfilling any need, it's not something that people are going to buy. Yeah. So sometimes it's just timing, and sometimes it's like, oh, there's just no outlet for that now. Right now there's so many outlets, I swear to God. You could almost find a buyer for any type of project. Yeah. Given that the timing's right and that the talent is someone that they find attractive. But yeah. Yeah. That's dope. We're trying. It's hard. It is. It's hard. You get it. Yeah. Pitching stuff. And you never know on your side of the table. It's like, okay, you have this idea that you think is really cool, and it probably is really cool. And you're so in it, and you got blinders on and tunnel vision, as you should, because you're focused on making this thing the best thing it can be. Yeah. And that's when things like having a manager or an agent helps, is they can take a kind of like outside perspective on this thing that you're so inside of, and go, okay, I have an overview of what the buyer's market is looking for, and I can see whether there's commodity in this and like where it could potentially go to be sold. And sometimes it really is just like, oh, this is a great idea, but we have something else in the pipeline like this right now, or we don't have any room for more scripted narrative right now because we just bought some already. Like, it's truly timing. It's like dating. Like, if you have ever had a crush on someone, but they're always like in a relationship, and then they're single, but you're in a relationship, and it's like, maybe one day it'll work out.
Yeah.
You gave such a knowing nod to that.
I did. Of course I did. Of course I did.
It's all timing.
Yeah. It's cool, though. We've pitched to you twice.
Yeah.
Twice?
Well,
since Wonk, I guess.
Most things don't get bought, and most things that get bought don't go to series. It's a business of failure. It's a business of saying no. It's very hard to get your head around that. Like, I have the hardest time passing on projects. Just know that every time I've had to pass on one of your projects, it's like, it hurts me to do so.
No, I know. Yeah.
You want to say yes. People in my position, you want to say yes.
I felt that you wanted to say yes.
Yeah.
I feel like we can delete anything, by the way. When we did, can I talk about pitches?
Please.
When we did the Lady Mavericks, I felt like we really messed up with the phone call, like having a phone call during the pitch. Also,
you mean that there was one writer that was being voiced in?
Yeah.
I mean, that's not ideal, but that's not like a problem. If you want to deconstruct that, I think the biggest issue with that was, and this is on me, but like, I didn't realize there was a script that you'd sent over in advance.
That's my fault too.
Like, there was a link that was sent, and it looked beautiful, but I was like it was like, in the situation where I'm at, I have an inbox full of ideas that people are sending me at all times. Like, to make it like, as much as it's cool to like have a big flashy presentation, unless that's conveying something or communicating something that could not be communicated in a more simple fashion, it's better to just like less is more. So sending over like whatever it takes to communicate the idea. So some people don't want to send a script in advance because they want, even if they have one or not, they like to say they don't because you can get paid to write the script. And especially if you're going to have to rewrite it for that specific buyer's needs anyway, like, might as well get paid for that, you know? So I didn't realize there was a script in advance. If I had read the script, I could have saved you guys the meeting because I would have known, oh, this isn't quite tonally on brand for us, like those 4 brand filters. And then, like, we also consider point of view. So... yeah, that was one where I was like, okay, I felt like a dick because I had wasted your guys' time to come in. And so that was what happened with that. I don't think having the writer on the phone, like, it's never ideal to have someone like video conferenced or voice conferenced in, just because it's like it's clunky and it's all about like communicating the idea. But I don't think that was like a huge problem. No.
Okay. What about Wonk News?
Wonk News was a cool idea that I think ultimately felt a little too alty for us.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember exactly. But like, that was like a cool concept. And then it felt like the way that you guys wanted it to play out, it wasn't like exactly filling a need for us. Yeah. It was a cool idea, cool project. I liked that you guys were doing it. Something that I would maybe watch as a human being, but it wasn't filling a need for us at my job right now.
Yeah.
So I shared that with like our digital department, and they're like, yeah, this just isn't really like what we're trying to do right now. So that was all that was.
I get it.
Just a timing thing.
Yeah, we'll just keep coming at you.
Keep coming at
you and keep coming at like the 100 other.
Yeah, there's so many buyers.
There's so many buyers. It's like you'll find the right slipper.
Yeah, exactly.
Cinderella.
It's a Cinderella story.
It is. That's dope. Well, I'm giving you a dollar joke machine shirt from Mega Summer Hit, but it's also very important to me from just life in general. So thank you for being on the podcast.
Of course. And thanks for the shirt. I feel bad taking something so sentimental.
No way. It's been in my closet forever. So it's good. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, TK.
Yeah. Thanks for listening. I hope that was as informative for you as it was for me. Please like, subscribe, rate, comment, tell your friends, check us out, and anybody that's, down for Wonk is down with me. Let's party.